More than 4,500 wildfires have burned in Canada this year. 1/4 of those have been in British Columbia, which has declared a provincial state of emergency. Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec are also seeing active wildfires. The situation is so bad that military personnel are being deployed. Up to 350 personnel are heading to British Columbia to help battle those fires. That's on top of the airlift support already underway. Up to 120 Armed Forces personnel are on their way to Manitoba to help extinguish hotspots and contain priority fires. And earlier this month, military members were sent to Ontario to support evacuation efforts in the community of Poplar Hill First Nation. And it's not just wildfires that Armed Forces are responding to. About 100 troops are in Yukon to help with what has been described as the largest flood mitigation effort in the territory's history. Harjit Sajjan is Minister of National Defence. He's in Vancouver. Minister Sajjan, welcome back to the show.
Okay, good to hear from you, David.
So, Minister, to this point, about 570 Armed Forces personnel have been deployed across the country to deal with fire and with floods. How does that affect the military's other operational capabilities?
We're making sure that all our operational capabilities are met. Fortunately, we prepared for situations like this. We looked at having to deal with multiple crises at once when we put our defense policy together. We never wanted it to occur, but luckily the military has prepared for it, and you see the tremendous and extraordinary work of our Canadian Armed Forces members that are taking place in British Columbia, Manitoba, the Yukon, and you've also seen during this pandemic the tremendous work they've done from long-term care facilities, and also the international work that continues as well.
I just go back to 2019, sir, and Jonathan Vance at the time said that climate-related deployments were pushing the forces to their limits and that there was a need for people with more specialized training to deal with this sort of crises. How have those concerns been addressed?
Well, first of all, when we put our defense policy together and launched it in 2017, we looked at, as I stated, how do we deal with multiple crises. One of the things that we looked at was if we're going to be dealing with possible floods and fires, and we have immediate response units set up across the country to respond, it's better to have them ready to go and train, and that's exactly what you see right now. So, for example, the immediate response unit that is responding into BC and in Manitoba already have what's called the S100 Type 3 firefighter training. So when they arrive, they immediately can be put to use, and so those are based on the lessons that we have learned. Flood mitigation, so the flood work as well, same thing, learning how to put sandbagging in dikes. It's not as simple as just filling up a sandbag and creating a dike. There is an actual process for it to making sure that it's done effectively. So having that training early on really does save a lot of time, and especially when it comes to saving life and property, it's extremely important that we continue to take on these lessons.
Well, with these multiple deployments to deal with these multiple fires, floods, all kinds of natural disasters, I mean, do you expect that you will have to deploy even more CAF personnel, and how much more capacity do you have, sir?
We do have, we do have more capacity. We obviously are prepared to respond more, especially when we had the pandemic. We had enough troops to be able to respond for a pandemic and incidents like this. So we have what we call immediate response units spread out across the country from the regular force. But let's not forget, we also have our reserves and our rangers. Our reserves have the domestic response companies. Our rangers already have been doing tremendous work. So we do have considerable amount of flexibility. Obviously, this does take a toll on certain trades. Mm-hmm. Like during the pandemic was heavily reliant on medical personnel. But nonetheless, the great work that we've done with managing that with our Surgeon General and working with the provinces, we've been able to kind of mitigate those type of concerns. But nonetheless, one thing that we have committed to, making sure that the Canadian Armed Forces will be there at the Canadians' time of need, and they have delivered every single time.
Since we last spoke, Minister, retired General Jonathan Vance, who I just mentioned, he has now been formally charged with obstruction of justice related to an investigation into allegations of sexual misconduct against him. What's your reaction to the charges against Jonathan Vance?
David, especially for me as a minister, it's inappropriate for me to comment on any investigation or any case that's before the courts.
What does this do to Canadians' confidence in the military, though, to see yet more charges, more investigations, this string of problems coming out of the top ranks of the military?
One thing I'm going to say again, I can't comment on any of the case, but I know that the Canadian Armed Forces is resilient. We have a lot more work to do. We have from the progress that we have started to making sure that the Canadian Armed Forces is an inclusive environment, and we're going to continue on that path. Because as you have seen across the country, the Canadian Armed Forces delivering for Canadians. That's what we're focused on, and we want to be able to reach out to all Canadians, regardless of ethnicity. We want to have gender parity in the Canadian Armed Forces, and we want to have an environment inside the Canadian Armed Forces that allows everybody to succeed. And we're not going to stop until we reach that goal.
There's the good work that the forces do, sir, in fires and floods and disasters and during the COVID crisis, but then there is the leadership problems and challenges that they face. And then there's a civilian oversight component of this, because you've been the only defense minister this government has had. And why should Canadians have confidence in your leadership to fix this when a lot of this has happened on your watch?
You know what, David? One thing that I've seen from my own lived experience, I've seen also the challenges of what this type of issues that have happened, the impact that it has on the Canadian Armed Forces. From the time that our government was formed, from the time that I became a minister, this is the type of work that we've been trying to do. When we put our defense policy forward, the number one chapter was focused on people. We know that when it comes to systemic issues like this, that we can't fix it overnight. We also know that the challenges are always going to come up. What really matters is, are we going to be able to step up and continue and not be able to hide anything under the carpet? That's something that I've always been focused on. And I'm going to continue to strive not only to do better, but more importantly, continue on the path that we have started until we reach the goal that we had just talked about earlier.
Are you proud of your record on this, though, sir? I mean, we've got an election coming up, and this is undoubtedly going to be an issue in the campaign. So are you proud of this record, and I think you can justify this to voters?
You know what, David? I'm not here to talk about judge my own record. I'm happy for Canadians to judge what I've done, just like I've done in the past. I've served as a Vancouver police officer. I've served in the Canadian Armed Forces. I saw the challenges personally, but more importantly, when my lived experience, what I bring to the table, I also know how the impact that it has on others, the women that have come forward when it comes to the racism issues as well. I take all that experience of making sure that how we can do better. So I'm not here to judge myself. I let others and Canadians judge me for the actions that we have taken.
One more topic I'd like to cover, if you can indulge me, and as part of your lived experience, is Afghanistan and the government's efforts, in particular, to bring Afghan interpreters and others who assisted Canada's mission in that country. Where is that now? What is the holdup, and how quickly could we see movement of actually bringing people out of Afghanistan into Canada?
First of all, David, there is no holdup. I know that all our departments are working absolutely diligently right now to come up with the appropriate plan that can look after the safety of the people that we're trying to help, but do it in a way that as efficiently as possible. And we'll have a plan to present shortly on this. We do have good experience from our Syrian refugee crisis that when our government came to power in 2015, and we're going to put the same type of effort and experience to good use.
Will we see things like Canadian military flights deployed to Afghanistan to pick people up and bring them back? Is that the sort of measure that you're looking at here, sir?
I can assure you that all options are currently on the table. I do have a team in country right now assessing the situation. We do have planners currently working with U.S. Central Command on this, but this is going to take a whole of government approach, just like as we did last time to get this done, and we will get it done. So
how quickly do you think we could see people here? I mean, is this something that can happen in days or weeks, or are we talking months? Because again, not to make everything about the election, but if we go into caretaker mode, that does create specific challenges for a government. So are we looking at something happening in the next week to 10 days to 2 weeks?
No, David, we're talking about people's lives here, and we want to make sure this is done safely and effectively. So we're working diligently on that plan. We're not going to rush to do something that's going to put anybody's life in danger. But one thing I can assure you that we are moving very quickly, and we will have a plan to present shortly. Okay, Minister Harjit Sajjan, thank you so much for your time. Great, thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.